Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. I'm here with another Figured Out Baseball podcast today, and we're joined on the call today by Bryan Torresani. Bryan is the head coach at Arcadia University. It is an NCAA Division III school in Glenside, Pennsylvania, in southeast PA here. I'll give you a little bit of background on Coach Torresani before we jump into questions with him, let you get to know him a little bit better. Coach Torresani is a Hatboro, Pennsylvania native. He started his playing career at Penn State Abington, which is a Division III, NCAA Division III school. He was there for a year and a half before transferring to Elizabethtown College, which is a Division III in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. At Elizabethtown, Coach Torresani was a 3-year starter as a catcher and a first baseman. The team made 3 straight postseason appearances while he was at Elizabethtown, including winning the conference championship and advancing to the regional in 2006. And Coach Torresani graduated from Elizabethtown in 2006. 2007, he coached and taught social studies at Hatboro Horsham High School, also in Pennsylvania. During that time, he was also the head coach for the American Legion team for 2 years, and both of those American Legion teams went on to win the league championship. From 2008 to 2012, he was an assistant head coach at Chestnut Hill College, which is a Division II school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 2008 and 2009, he coached the outfielders, first basemen, catchers, did the recruiting, the bulk of the recruiting there. And then from 2010 to 12, he worked primarily with the pitching staff, which is kind of an interesting dynamic for someone to jump from hitters to pitchers. Coach Torresani also earned his master's degree from Chestnut Hill in 2010. In the fall of 2012, he was hired as an assistant coach at LaSalle, which is a Division I school in Philadelphia. He was hired to be the recruiting coordinator and also coach the hitters, catchers, and outfielders. However, in the spring of 2013, he was also hired as the head coach at Immaculata University, which is a Division III school in Malvern, Pennsylvania. During his time there, he had 4 straight winning seasons, including setting a school record for wins 3 straight seasons. He had 14 students on the conference all-academic team in 2016, and in 4 seasons total, he had 26 players named to the all-conference team. In 2017, the spring of 2017, he was hired as the head coach at Arcadia, where he still is. 2017, his first spring there, the team won the conference championship and went to an NCAA tournament for the first time since 2004. That year, they won 33 games, which was a new school record. Coach Torresani was voted the conference coach of the year that season. He also had 8 players voted to the all-conference team. In 2018, he followed up the first season there by winning the conference championship again, going to the NCAA tournament again. That year, the team won 31 games, which was the second most wins in school history. They had a player named Conference Player of the Year that year, the first ever from Arcadia, and also the same player was voted an NCAA Division III All-American, also the first All-American from Arcadia. In 2019, the team won 25 games. Coach Torresani now in 3 seasons is 86-46 as the head coach. And this, folks, is for a team that won less than 10 games 4 times in 8 years before Coach Torresani got there. So a pretty amazing turnaround and a good string of success that he's having now. In 2019, the team had 8 more players voted to the all-conference team. He had a player set the school's all-time hits record on April 1st with about 1 full month of the regular season left to go. So Coach Torresani, it's a great resume, and I've really enjoyed our conversations personally, so I'm glad to have you on a podcast here where some other people can get to know you a little bit.
Jeff, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction and admire what you're doing with Figured Out Baseball, and I'm glad to be a part of it and looking forward to talking today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So Coach Torresani's also got quite a few videos on the website. If you haven't checked it out, it's figureitoutbaseball.com. You can check out videos from Coach Torresani on a number of different things. He's got a lot of base running videos, got some team stuff on there, and hopefully we'll have some more videos from him coming in the future. But Coach Torresani, I typically like to start with some things that kind of stick out to me from resumes as I'm kind of reading those. And just for you, the one thing that I have circled and just I don't know, just something I think is interesting, especially for maybe young coaches out there, is that you got your master's degree in 2010. When I first started coaching in college, I was told that you needed a master's degree if you wanted to keep coaching and you wanted to be a head coach. I believe that's changing maybe a little bit as far as the absolute need for one. But in your experience, has a master's degree helped you in the coaching world in any way? Do you think that maybe gives you a leg up on some other people if you apply for jobs, or, for a young guy out there who wants to coach in college or maybe has got his start, is that something you'd recommend, or is that just, for you a personal choice among coaches?
I think it's been really important for me. I was fortunate that, when I was at Chestnut Hill College, I was also part of the undergraduate admissions staff there as an admissions counselor, and eventually worked my way up to associate director of admissions. And so I was able to get my master's for free, which was really helpful. I know a lot of young coaches just starting out maybe volunteer or make little money, and that can be a little more difficult. But certainly the GA route at different places is very beneficial for guys to get a start. And I do think now that I'm on the other end of things, that I'm on hiring committees here at Arcadia for head coaching positions when they become available, and going through those processes, I do think having a master's degree still holds some significant weight. I think baseball is a little bit different because of so many people having professional experience that end up in coaching, that sometimes that playing experience can outweigh the master's. But I still think it's an important, thing that to strive for.
Are there a lot of graduate positions out there nowadays? I don't know if that's another thing that's changed. I know that again, when I first started coaching, I had heard that, my mentors, when they first started coaching, GA positions were about the only way to go. Are there still some of those out there? Are they more prominent at one level or another, as far as you're aware?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, they're not allowed at the Division I level in terms of on-field coaching GAs. So they're definitely more prevalent at the Division II, Division III, and NAIA level, where a lot of times, some schools will sort of that'll be their main assistant will be a GA, and it's a really good place where you can get a lot of responsibility as a young coach, and really get a good foot in the door. So. I know NCAA.org and the marketplace there is a really good reference for positions that become available, including graduate assistantships. So I do think it's somewhat prevalent in baseball. I wish there was more of them out there. We don't have one currently in Arcadia. I think it would be a great asset, and I do think it can be a really beneficial way for a young coach to go if they can get one of those.
Tell me again, what's the website if coaches are interested in kind of seeing what's out there, or maybe just graduated from college, is looking for something, looking for maybe a start?
Sure, it's ncaa.org, and it's under the employment section of the website. I think it's called the NCAA Marketplace. So if they can just kind of scroll through ncaa.org, it's pretty easy to find. And you can search it a number of different ways, via keyword or geography or whatever the case may be. So it's pretty user-friendly.
Does the ABCA still have on their website, do they still have coaches posting job openings as well?
Yes, they do. Yep, there are job postings on that as well. And I know a lot of the GAs get posted on there. Skipper's Dugout, which is a Twitter handle, that does a really nice job posting job openings. And they also have a website where they post job openings on their board as well. Those are really the three main outlets that I can think of off the top of my head where I see a lot of the baseball jobs get posted.
Okay, I don't know if you've ever had any success with yourself, but my first, I guess my first job where I had a lot of responsibility was at a junior college in Iowa, and I know that I found that through the ABCA website. It was posted there, and I just kind of blindly applied for it and got it, and that really set the kind of trajectory for my career. So certainly would recommend that to anybody who's looking to get into coaching and just want to see what's out there, want to see what's available. Another thing that sticks out to me, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about on any kind of podcast that I do, is the winning part. You've had a great track record of winning pretty much everywhere you've been, from your playing career all the way through your coaching career, and it's pretty rare for someone to take over as a head coach and have the immediate type of success that you had. That was your first year at Arcadia, where you went to an NCAA regional for the first time since 2004. Set a school record for wins that year. How much of that, not to ask you to pat yourself on the back, but how much of that was already in place with the players you had? How much of that was maybe kind of just some of the things that you wanted to change or bring into the program? Can you just kind of speak about that first year for us at Arcadia?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there was a great stable of players that were here when I got here, and Ken Spangenberg, who was the head coach prior to me, who left to run a travel organization in this area, was a phenomenal recruiter here at Arcadia and a really good coach as well. And so the program was well positioned for success when I got here. And so I certainly don't for a second think that it was just me that, that's the reason why we did what we did that year. I was also very fortunate to have two holdover assistants from the previous year in Jimmy Goulden and Will Kaufman. Jimmy was our pitching coach and Will coached our hitters. And so they were here the previous year and knew the players and knew the roster inside and out. And so that was a huge advantage for me coming in to have a bridge between myself, and the roster. And just the way it worked out, we had 5 seniors on that team who, for whatever reason, decided to buy into what I was selling. And, that really sort of got its way down through the rest of the roster, and there was a lot of quick buy-in, and we were able to have a really, really good season. But I do think a lot of it had to do with our assistant coaches and their roles in that year and really educating me on the conference and the schedule, and it was all new for me. So, there were certainly some culture aspects and things I think that we did a little different when I got here that helped, but by and large, those seniors and those 2 assistant coaches were really a major part of the success of that season.
So you've been able to sustain the success since you've got there, and you just mentioned team culture. Would you talk a little bit about what team culture means to you, and how you've been able to establish the team culture that you have now at Arcadia? Maybe some key elements to that.
Yeah, I think that culture thing is such a buzzword now, and I think it's really pretty simple. I mean, we do have every year we have a player expectation meeting at the beginning of the fall, and I do have a detailed packet on the expectations and some of the rules of the program and things like that. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to preach to our guys is to just be a good citizen and give their best effort in everything that they do. So we start in the classroom and work from there and the practice field and the weight room, and sort of everything sort of coincides with each other, where we're really just asking them to give their best and don't do anything that's going to reflect poorly on themselves, their family, or the program. I mean, that's really the simplest form. And I think past that, the thing that we've done well and the thing I think you can let slide is it's almost like taking care. Your team culture is almost like taking care of a plant, to use a poor analogy, but you got to give it water. You got to give it sunlight. It needs attention every single day to grow, and I think that's where we try to sort of just continue that culture, because the point we make to our guys is their grades and the reputation around campus and sort of their character and everything that goes into that carries over onto the field. Like, there's a reason why we've had success, and it's not just because we're talented baseball players. It's because our guys have held up their end of the bargain in those other areas. And, to sell an 18 to 22-year-old kid on that can be difficult, but when they see it start to happen and the results are what they are, on the website in terms of wins and losses, I think that's really how you can kind of generate that buy-in. So, it's interesting. We're in the off season now, and so we don't get a lot of contact time with our guys face to face in terms of like being on the field or things like that. But just little things, whether it's a text message to a specific guy or a text message in our team group about anything culture related, or just conversations in the office. Like, everything we do sort of comes back to that culture. And we pride ourselves on 3 things, and it's just the acronym EAT: effort, attitude, and toughness. And we kind of have some subsets on all 3 of those things, but those are the 3 things we think guys can control on a daily basis and try to hold them to that standard. So I think it's been the driving force of why we've had success here so far.
When it comes to team culture, what's more important? Bringing in players that are going to that you feel like are the right personalities to buy in, or having coaches that live and breathe the culture all the time so that the players sort of absorb it? You think one of those is more important than another as far as establishing? Again, I like to kind of gear some of these questions toward somebody that wants to replicate your success. How can they do it? So do you think it's more important to have the coaches around you who are all on the same page with one another all the time, or is it more important to bring in a certain character of kid that you maybe know from past experience, like this is the type of kid who's going to buy in and is going to, going to help us to sustain that culture?
I think I don't know if one's more important than the other. I think they kind of go hand in hand. And I know, you probably have a stable of high school coaches that might listen to this podcast too. And some of those guys, I'm the son of a high school coach at a public school. So I know they don't get to pick their players every year. So that can be difficult. You do get some say in your coaching staff, and maybe sometimes those are even hard to find really good candidates that have the time to do that for a small amount of money. But at the end of the day, I think regardless if they're players or they're coaches, you have to surround yourself with people that, are willing to kind of pull on the same end of the rope. And certainly through it, and we're just talking about our experiences here through our recruiting process. That's their campus visit and our subsequent conversations. A big piece of that is trying to parse out that part of it. Like, that's what we don't know until they get here. You can get an idea. You can talk to their high school or travel coaches about their character and things like that. But, there's been times when I've just sort of had a gut feeling that this guy might not be the right guy for our program, and he might be talented, but we decide to sort of not pursue the recruiting process with that person. But when you're talking about a coaching staff, and like I've been really fortunate to have assistants that, really live and breathe that culture. And when I look at hiring assistants, that's a huge part of it for me. I think the baseball piece is one thing, but if I can't trust somebody and they're not somebody that can help me drive the culture for what we're looking for, then it's probably just not going to work. I mean, it has to be one voice from the coaching staff that really resonates with the players so that they know the expectations day in and day out.
What kind of questions are you asking assistant coaches when you're going to hire somebody to know whether or not they're going to be that type of coach that you really need them to be?
Yeah, I always like for them to give me examples of things. So, a lot of times when I do hire assistant coaches, they're coming as assistants from other programs. Maybe they were a graduate assistant, and this is kind of be their first sort of quote-unquote paid position. So, I'll ask them like, hey, tell me about a situation where the head coach made a decision that you disagreed with, and basically, how did you handle that? What did you do? Did you sit down with the head coach and have a conversation? And did you talk behind his back and to the players? And just give me an idea of like how you would handle that situation if it was you and I. Because certainly, if you hire good coaches, then they're going to be guys that are going to have their own opinion, and you want them to have their own opinion and bring ideas to the table. But at the end of the day, the head coach is the guy that sort of has the hammer. So you need to make sure that regardless of the decision you make, that they're going to have your back, on that standpoint. I think some of the other things that I like to ask guys in that situation is like, why do you want to coach? Like, why do you want to be a coach in college? And I think just an open-ended question like that and that answer can really reflect on the type of person that they are. I mean, I know even for me as a young coach, it was kind of all about the wins and losses and the competition piece of it. Like, you're just coming off being a player. But as I've grown in my career and started a family and all that, it's funny how your perspective changes. And the reason that I do what I do is because I want to impact, young men and help them in their lives, past the baseball field and continue to have relationships with those guys 10, 15, 20 years down the road when they're starting their own families and really beginning, the bulk of the rest of their lives. And so and you get a young guy on the phone and can ask them that question about why they're doing what they're doing, I think that can really open up a lot about that person.
So if you're bringing in a young coach, would you rather have the coach who has your perspective of impacting players as the most important thing, or would you rather have yourself as a 22-year-old who really wants to compete and win and sort of have a balance with your point of view at this time? Is there, just for you personally, is there one that's a preference for you over another?
Yeah, I want the guy. I really do want sort of the 22-year-old version of myself, because I think not that I'm not competitive. I always make the joke that I'm the most competitive guy in the room, and when push comes to shove, and like I want to win just as badly as anybody else. But at the end of the day, you got to have somebody to kind of to help kind of push that side of it forward. And I feel like I like to be a mentor too. So, that if I can help shape that person a little bit in, in helping them sort of see the other reasons about why they're coaching and while they're on my staff, I think I can do that a little bit easier than sort of teaching them how to be competitive and the winning and losing part of it. So, that's been, I'm super fortunate now. I'm looking at one of our assistant coaches who, Kyle Lindsay, who came to us this year from Misericordia University. And he's the perfect balance of both. I mean, he was a graduate assistant at Misericordia. They've won their conference 9 times in a row. He was a player there and then was a coach there after that. So he spent 7 seasons in a winning program. And he's a young guy, and he's got a really good balance of both of those areas. So I'm super fortunate right now. But at the end of the day, I think he's the one that pushes me on the competitive side to say, hey, we need to amp things up a little bit.
I think it's important. It's it's really important to have that balance, and I appreciate that I'm sure that's part of the reason for your success is having that balance and having some, a little bit of a different perspectives. And like you said, I like just what you said about having, when you have good coaches, they don't always agree with one another, and you want guys that have their own opinion and their own ideas. And but at the end of the day, obviously, it's your final call. One of the things that you mentioned, just going back a little ways, a couple questions ago, was you guys have a meeting at the beginning of the year to establish your expectations, your team rules, things like that. What are some team rules that a high school player could expect to see when he gets to college?
Yeah, sure. I think some of them are just the classic, like, timeless rules that I think every coach has, and one is being on time. I think that's where it starts. And this is the first, when guys get to college especially, it's really the first time in their life that they have sort of complete autonomy over their decisions. And so that's really, can you be where you need to be at the time that you need to be there, I think says a lot about that person in particular, and just a lot about the culture of a team. Our guys are really good about that, which I'm fortunate. It sounds silly and simple and almost like, why wouldn't they do that? But, I think you'd be surprised at different places out there where that may not be the case. So, it starts there, and then the other expectations are that guys don't miss any class. They need to be in class every single day, and no unexcused absences, and we're able to check on some of that stuff with their professors and classroom checks and things like that. That they wear the right practice gear every day. We have a practice plan that goes out plenty early enough in the morning that specifically states what we're wearing that day for practice, all the way down to their belt color and pants and T-shirt, hat, whatever it is. They need to be in that attire when they get to the field and ready to go, or we send them home. And the point that we try to make is there really are no small things that all these things add up to being bigger things. Like, if we can't pay attention to details in our off the field life, how can we expect you to execute a perfect double cut relay to nail a runner at the plate, or get down a suicide squeeze bunt on command when we ask you to do that, and pay attention to all the details of how to execute those plays. So it even spills over into our clubhouse, and this is something that Coach Lindsay brought to us this year from his experience. Was we're very fortunate to have 2 locker rooms where each guy has their own stall, and where all their uniforms are kept, and their practice gear and everything else. And inside each of their lockers is a sheet that lists exactly in which order all their uniforms are supposed to be hung up, where their practice pants go, where their gloves go, where their hat goes. And if their locker doesn't look like that at the end of a practice, then we run the next day. So again, just trying to really drive those expectations of paying attention to details. And I think that's really the bottom line.
How open are you with recruits about, what just those level of expectations and that level of attention to detail, before they come in?
Yeah, well, we walk them right in one of the first things we do when they get to our field is we walk them right in the locker room and show them that sheet that hangs in the locker. And and kind of just like I'm talking with you, it's the same message of like, we really feel like doing these things is going to help your life. We're here to be educators, and if you can't take care of this space that's 3 feet wide by 5 feet tall, how can we expect you to take care of the crazy schedule that you're going to have to manage, once you get here, between weightlifting and practice and games and class and everything else that goes into it. And it's funny, the parents a lot of times, are the ones that really appreciate that message. And I think some of it can sometimes get lost on the recruit, but I think certain guys actually really appreciate that. And the interesting thing, even with our current team, is I think a lot of times guys that, high school age, college age, especially younger college age guys, like as much as they don't realize it, they want that structure and discipline. And once you start to give them a little bit of that, you can really see some quick maturity growth and just some different, just almost a change in that guy for the better. And they'll come back and say, like, Coach, I never realized how much like now I make my bed every morning and I take care of my room neater just because you're asking me to take care of my locker better.
Not to beat this to death, but I had a player as an assistant coach in college who didn't like to have to be under those type of constraints. And I can recall at one point specifically, we were in the batting cages in the winter, and at that, there were times when we let the guys come into the cages just in shorts, if we were just going to the cage to hit. And this one particular player who was one of the better players on our team, and he knew that, did not want to tuck his shirt in. And when he got to my cage, I would not throw to him until he tucked his shirt in. And he didn't like that. And there, like, he would legitimately tuck his shirt in for my cage, and then he would untuck it again when he got out of there. And I had a pretty stern conversation with him afterwards, and I know that one of our other assistant coaches at the time was like, because we had some other issues with this guy. He had some discipline issues from time to time. He had some issues just with basically taking direction. And one of the other assistants said to me, like, hey, man, pick your battles. Like, this was, a small thing that maybe you don't need to go head-to-head with him on. And I was like, no, this is one of those things that's really important because, for a lot of reasons. So before, without going on a tangent about it, if you had that player on your team who just did not see the importance of these little things that had nothing to do with, whether it does or not, in his mind has nothing to do with what's happening on the field. How do you communicate with that player and get that player to really understand why it's important to you and why you spend time on it? And, why wouldn't we just spend time going out on the field practicing? Why are you worried about how I'm dressed and how my locker looks? What's your conversation with that player?
Yeah, I think it's, sit down in the office one-on-one and really, I think the point that I make to our guys is like, hey, listen, I played for some great coaches through high school and college too, but these things weren't things that even they asked me or my teammates to do at that time. But looking back on it now, I wish they had, because I think I would have been a better student. I would have been a better player. I would have been just an overall better person sooner if these things were asked of me. And then I try to take it one step further and say, listen, like when you graduate from here and you leave, you're going to, what's your goal? And a lot of times they're going to say, well, I want to have a job and make money and X, Y, and Z. And I tell them, I say, you think your job's not going to have a dress code and you're not going to have a certain time that you need to show up to work and certain expectations that you're going to need to do in order to collect that paycheck every 2 weeks, and just kind of shoot them straight as to why I'm kind of doing him a benefit of holding him to those standards, because I'm not just looking at it on the baseball field. I'm looking at helping to better his life. And, you got to hope some of that resonates. And I do have a little bit of a bleeding heart for kids, when it comes to that part of it with the discipline. And I'm not afraid to give a kid second chances and sometimes even third chances, depending on the situation. But I do think that there are some times at the end of the day where you just got to get if it's a wrong guy on the bus, you just got to get him off. So, but in that particular case, I think it starts with that type of conversation, and hopefully you can see a change and go from there.
I'm going to talk about another thing along the same lines. You kind of mentioned again, a while back, several questions ago, and you mentioned team rules and also just expectation in the classroom. What do you talk about with your guys as far as expectation in the classroom? And I think this is important to get into because for anyone that's listening to this that is in any way involved with high school student athletes, I think sometimes a high school student athlete thinks that when they get to college, it's just going to be about on the field stuff, and in the off the field stuff, the classroom stuff is just kind of up to them, and they're not going to have a coach up their butt about it. But what are the conversations you have with your players? What are your expectations for your players as far as what they're doing in the classroom?
Yeah, it's funny you mention this because I even have a video on the website about about current guys and their grades and kind of how it correlates to the guys that end up on the field. But I think the initial message, is just that we expect you to do your very best in everything that you're doing, and your grades are a reflection of that. And so you're sort of putting together your own little advertisement to the coaching staff on why you should be a part of the program, and why, and one step past that, even like why we should put you on the field. And I do, in my career, I've seen a direct correlation between guys that are good students and guys that produce results on the field. And so even last year we have a team meeting when we get back in January, and I go through a PowerPoint presentation, and sometimes I think our guys are maybe half asleep by the time I get near the end of it. And the last slide I pulled up, I said, all right, guys, here's the starting lineup for, the first game of the season. And, of course, that woke them up. And I posted the lineup, just based off of GPA. I said, if we play today, this is who we put on the field. Look at their GPAs. And, 1 through 9, and our starting pitcher, 9 out of 10 of them were over 3.2. And only one guy was below a 3.0. And I said, listen, if you want to take the 10% chance of being that guy that's not holding up their end of the bargain in the classroom and think you're going to get on the field, like, be my guest, but look what you're up against here. And I said, I don't look at your GPA when I write the lineup, but this is just the way it shakes itself out. And I think that really resonated with the players. And it's funny, I think we're at a point now where where we know the type of student that we need to recruit that will, that wants to be in the classroom, and that we don't have to chase down to turn their work in and things like that. So I'm very fortunate, especially at the type of school that we're at, where most of the time we're getting academically motivated guys. But I guess the point is to just try to push them to really do the best they possibly can.
I think it's so important, and I have heard from the time I started coaching, when I was just trying to learn everything I could about coaching, I've heard from them, and from then until now, that if you don't get it done in the classroom, you're not going to get it done in the field. And I don't know how often you've done it, but I've taken chances on guys who are very, very questionable in the classroom because they were so talented, and it was like inevitable that there was going to come the day when I was disappointed with that player's output on the field. And at that point, as a coach, you look back and think, like, boy, was that worth it? I mean, was it worth it to take this guy? He was so talented on the field, but just didn't take care of the small details, and it comes back. Like I said, there always comes a time when you're disappointed in something that he does. I mean, has that been your experience as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we all do that. I think, it's almost like, is the juice worth the squeeze type of thing. Like, yes, we want to have guys that are good students and good people and everything else, but at the end of the day, like, we are also here to win baseball games, and from time to time you do take a chance on a kid. And I've seen it go both ways. I've had situations in the past where I might have had that feeling about a guy, and he comes in and he does buy in, and it's the same kid that's hugging you on senior day with tears rolling down his face because of the impact you've had on his life. And I've had the guy that doesn't even make it to fall ball, because they just can't handle it. So I think it can go both ways, but I never fault a coach for taking a chance on a kid that they think they can make an impact on.
So let's want to kind of switch gears a little bit and just go back to winning in general. So we talked about how important team culture is to winning and sustain success. But for you, Coach Torresani, if you were to lay out a blueprint, on paper for a winning team for other coaches to follow, give me give me maybe the one element. Let's just start with one. Give me the one element that you don't think a team can win without, whether it's Arcadia or whether it's LSU or whatever. Just winning baseball starts with blank. If you don't have blank, I don't believe you can have success, whether it's recruiting or your call or the culture or, assistant coaches or whatever you think it is. What's maybe in your mind the one most important thing that you absolutely cannot win without?
Man, that's a good question. I'm going to kind of take it a little more on the field, I think. And I think the obvious answer would be good pitching, but I'm actually going to say good defense. And I think that, we tell our guys all the time, like, hitting is kind of fickle, that, you could face a really good arm one day and it's going to be tough to score runs. And, your pitcher can come out and maybe not have his best stuff, but the one thing that can't slump ever is defense. And when you play against a really good defensive team that doesn't give up extra outs and throws the ball to the right base and doesn't give up extra free bases and makes the routine plays, like, regardless of their lineup, regardless of the guy that they have on the mound, that team is really tough to beat day in and day out. And so I know that's one thing that, we focus on a lot is that, because we really feel like we can help control that as a coaching staff a little bit and really hone in on some things that, starting very simply with our throwing program and how important that is every day, and the detail that goes into that and the structure that goes into that to take care of the ball. So I think that's the one thing that's really tough to win without is good defense.
Interesting answer. Not what I was expecting from you. That's great. Very, very, to me, one of the most interesting things about that is that when you go to a showcase, what's on display for offensive players is basically you take BP, so you're looking at a guy's ability to maybe hit line drives, but a lot of times it's, let's see how far this guy can hit the ball. And even on defense, it's more about, maybe hand quickness, but it's a lot about arm strength, right? I mean, it's about the measurables at those things, at those type of showcases that you go to, and everybody, most high school kids end up going to some sort of a showcase at some point. But it's interesting to me that the defense probably is the most important thing to you that you really cannot win without. That makes me think of just talking to somebody a couple of days ago about the Cubs, and the Cubs are maybe looking to deal, somebody this offseason because they have basically a couple of DHs in the lineup, and at some point that stuff comes back to hurt you when you got a guy that can hit but just flat out can't play defense. So.
Right.
So let's talk about, I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you have something else to say?
No, not at all. I think you hit the nail on the head.
Okay. What about your practice? So defense is a really important part to you about, of the success that your team has. So do you feel like Arcadia spends more time on defense than maybe most other teams do, since that's a focus for you, or is that just something that's sort of, incorporated with other parts of your practice? What are your practice structures like there, just a typical day?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. It certainly depends on the day. I think we don't have really I wouldn't say we have typical days just because we're doing different things at different times. But, the one thing that we stress to our guys that I kind of already mentioned is that the one thing we are going to do every single day is we're going to throw. And we're gonna throw for a period of time, whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's 20 minutes, even some days. And again, like in hiring good assistants and guys that bring good ideas from other places and things like that. Like Coach Lindsay's in charge of our throwing program here, and it's not your traditional like, hey, you and I are partners. We're gonna go play catch and get limbered up for 10 or 15 minutes and be good to go. I mean, there's a little bit of an aspect of that in the beginning, but once guys are kind of freed up and loose, we may take them on the field. Catchers, outfielders, infielders, put guys at all four bases, and we just do what we call it a four-corner throwing drill, where guys are throwing the ball one direction around the infield, and then we'll reverse directions. We'll go across the infield and then to one side. So, and these are things you could do in a gym too, which is kind of neat. And really the whole point is to just take care of the ball. Can we make good throws 90 feet apart that really are well executed and sharp? And I think that's something that we touch on every single day. which has really, really helped us, I think, even this fall defensively. And the other drill we do that, again, being a good coach, I think, is being a good thief. And a lot of people do a version of 27 outs or 21 outs. But one of the things that we instituted this fall was a version of the drill where, we're trying to make 27 routine plays, no base runners, anything like that. It's just straight up routine plays. And our players are the ones deciding whether or not we made a mistake on that play. So it could be a base hit to the outfield and our center fielder short hops the cutoff man with nobody on base. Well, our guys are running off the field and the next defense is running on and we're starting back at zero because that just doesn't live up to our expectations and of what we are all about. And it's interesting to see who steps up in that situation in terms of which player or players and kind of the players are then setting the expectation, which I think is the way that you really want to have it. So a lot of those things we'll do up front in practice and as well as our base running. I think you get their attention is definitely the best at the beginning of practice. So if there's anything you want to teach or the thing that you want to make the most important, we try to do that up front at the beginning of practice. And then, after that, we kind of get into our hitting and some of our offensive stuff.
Very good. In an interesting way to kind of structure practice. I think it's a great way to, to look at it. If you're going to teach something, it's got to be at the beginning. And I like the fact that you guys are at least touching on defense every day, and base running is something that happens a lot at your practices, which kind of leads to a next question. When a player first gets on campus with you, and I'm asking this specifically because of the amount of throwing that you do, what is the biggest surprise to a kid when he gets on campus? Like, what is he most surprised about at practice? Like, wow, we are really we're spending this much time on this, or maybe their body's not conditioned for a certain thing that you do, whether maybe it's running or maybe you do some kind of conditioning things with your guys. But what is it kind of typically the most the thing you do at practice that I guess the incoming guys don't expect to do as much, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think certainly from a defensive end, we just talked about it, is the throwing every day and the volume, of throws that we ask guys to make. I think our freshmen, if they could do it all over again, would probably have their arms in a little bit better shape, coming into the fall. I think from an offensive end, it's probably hitting against velocity every day off of our pitching machines and even live arms up close. I know this is becoming more popular, and I think that's a really good thing, especially at the high school level. And so we're getting more guys that are accustomed to doing this, but that's something that we do every single day in the fall. And they don't love it because they don't have a lot of success at it, and we pump the machine up to 90, and we're really overtraining them, to beat the better pitchers and the best pitchers that we're going to see come the springtime. And I think, again, like as an incoming player, when maybe you're used to just taking sort of some comfort BP every day or some front toss or whatever, and then you're in there off a hack attack that is humming pretty good, it's frustrating. And I think those are the two things that I think really kind of catch guys off guard.
So you hit that kind of velocity in practice. And I want to touch on just one thing really quick. So this has been really just something that seems to be popularized in the last couple of years, but if someone is not familiar, so I mean, there's been kind of a push to hit off of a machine that's throwing at pretty good velocity, as opposed to just taking standard BP. Why is that? Why has that something that's become more popular over the last couple of years? Like, instead of front toss and overhand BP from 40 feet away, why has it become a thing, in your opinion, to hit off of a good, a machine with good velo?
Yeah, I think it's like, it kind of goes back to that old adage of, like, every coach kind of says, hey, we got to slow the game down. And I think the best way to slow the game down is to speed it up in practice and essentially try to make it harder in practice than it's going to be in a game. We don't face many guys at our level that are 90-mile-an-hour arms. I mean, we'll see it from time to time, but, when we train against that every single day and we get into a game and maybe we're facing a guy throwing 83 or 84, that all of a sudden, now the game's slowed down for them, and they have a lot more confidence walking into the plate, walking up to the plate, saying like, "Hey, I hit velocity harder than this every day at practice. Like, this is nothing." And same thing with the breaking balls off those machines. I mean, the breaking balls that those machines can throw now are filthy. and really tough to hit, and again are breaking pitches that we generally don't see from guys, day in and day out in the spring. And I just think that at the end of the day, even though it might crush their confidence a little bit in the moment, I think when what you're training for is for them to have confidence come game time. And I think we've just seen guys, confidence kind of skyrocket as a result of doing that. They're not afraid of anybody, and we kind of give it that to them every day. So I think that's part of the reason it's becoming popular. I also think social media is probably a big reason why it's becoming popular. You see a lot of it online on a daily basis, and so I think that's been a big driving force too. But I will say, since we started doing it a couple years ago, we've really seen some pretty good results from it. So it's something we're going to continue doing.
I like it a lot, slowing the game down by speeding it up in practice. So I think the old way of doing things in practice was more, it was less challenging, and you probably, it left practice. Most guys left practice feeling pretty good. Just hit, a great round of BP, got some fungos, things like that, and guys felt good. But it's almost like now the push is, just to kind of to piggyback on your last comment, but the push is kind of to really make practice much more challenging and much more game-like, so that when the game comes around, it's easier. And it's kind of the reverse idea. So the confidence in practice might not be as high, but the confidence in games is probably higher, than it would have been otherwise, because you're more well prepared for what you're going to see at game speed. Is that kind of the, to sum it up or say it a little bit of a different way, is that kind of the idea behind, practicing at more of a game type speed, even when it comes to BP?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you think about, and again, being the son of a coach that coached basketball, football, and baseball through the course of his career, and watching other sports practice for a number of years, baseball is really the only sport where, you're not necessarily going live every single day. I mean, football practice, there's going to be a segment of football practice generally most days, unless it's the day before a game, where you're going 11 on 11, and you're going at game speed and going live. Basketball, same thing. There's generally a segment of practice where it's 5-on-5 and you're scrimmaging and you're playing the game the way you would play it if there was people in the stands and another team on the court. So, I think in baseball, the limiting factor with that can be pitching, because obviously you're not going to roll your pitchers out there for, if they're not on enough rest, or if you got games coming up in the next day or two. But you can supplement that by using the machine, by using a BP pitcher that's a little closer to home plate, and throwing with a little bit, more giddy up, and even going as far as maybe doing some short box BP, where you have guys mixing pitches and making it more game-like. I think that's something that is really been a nice add-on to a lot of baseball programs that's been popularized over the last couple of years.
So what machine are you guys using at practice? What's your favorite machine that you've got?
We have a Hack Attack, and then we also have one from Triple Play Sports, which I can't remember the exact name of the model right now, but that one's actually electronically programmable. The Hack Attack, you can kind of set with the dials and throw different pitches. So we're fortunate enough to have two machines that we can get a lot of reps off of.
Very nice. So 90 miles an hour at Division III. I think that probably shocks some people when you said you don't see it every day, but you will see it throughout the season. Let's talk a little bit, just a little bit about Division III baseball, and maybe try to give people that are listening a better understanding. I talked about this in the last podcast I did, but just about, going out to watch different levels of baseball, and very few people have seen a Division III game, or any level. Very few people can say that they've seen a Division I baseball game, a Division II baseball game, a Division III baseball game, and are able to kind of see that there's, how much disparity there is between the levels. Tell us a little bit about Division III, just to maybe, let's start with what kind of arms are you typically seeing in a conference series? Some of the better teams in your league, some of the worst teams in your league. What are they like on paper, just to kind of get it started?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most interesting thing about our level is that we see everything. Like, we see the lefty that is 74, 75 miles an hour with a changeup in the low to mid 60s, and we'll see the righty, the big Friday righty that's humping it up to 90 plus, and we'll see everything in between. I think typically in our conference, and the best guys are guys that have a little bit of plus velocity, which at our level I would probably say is anywhere from 87, to 90, and also have a second and third pitch, and they locate well. I mean, they're guys that really could probably pitch at the Division I level in some capacity. And, after that, the 2s and 3s a lot of times are guys that probably don't have one or two of those things. So maybe they're hard throwers that lack some command issues. Maybe they're guys that have some command issues. Maybe they're guys that don't throw quite as hard, but still have, good second and third pitches. We'll see a lot of 81 to 84 with a good slider and can throw it for strikes, and we'll mix those two pitches very well. And so that's the interesting part. And so that leads us back to practice too a little bit, where we spend a lot of time with our hitters, not necessarily just on mechanics, but just on timing and how every pitcher is different. And you got to kind of dance with each guy that's on the mound to get in on time for that guy. Because like I said, you could face your first time through the order, you might be facing that lefty that's, sort of that below bat speed, 75, 76 mile an hour lefty. And they might go to their better bullpen guy who's an upper 80s guy the next time through. And you got to be able to be on time for both of those.
It's really interesting. What about, as far as, the rest of the guys in the field? It's easy probably to talk about pitchers because of velocity. Velocity makes an easy conversation. But what are you seeing? What are you recruiting as far as position players? Maybe what could people expect to see at Division III compared to some of the other levels when it comes to the guys that some of your better guys, your defensive guys up the middle, your guys in the middle of your lineup? What are those guys like compared to some of the guys at other levels that they might see? Just comparing the level of baseball again.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to depth. I mean, not this past fall, but the past couple falls, we played a Division I school in this area in the fall, and we'd compete with them pretty well through most of the day, and then generally what would happen is that their depth would start to take over a little bit, and so like our frontline guys, and I think the really good D3 programs out there, you're looking at players that may not have been Division I guys coming out of high school, but by the time that they're sophomores, juniors, seniors, like they're guys that would not look out of place on a Division I field. I think the D1s just have all of those guys, and so that really is a little bit of the difference. I mean, up the middle, you're still gonna see some really good defensive shortstops. I think that's the one thing I've noticed in playing in 2 regionals since I've been here, is that every good Division III team has an excellent defensive shortstop. A lot of times that guy is undersized, and that's probably why they ended up at Division III and not at a higher level. But they can all pick it. They all make above routine plays and are just really, really good players. And all the better teams do have some guys in the middle of their order that do have some really good power. And again, I think some of it comes down to body type. They might not be the prototypical 6'3", 230-pound first baseman, that's playing for Clemson. They might be 5'10" and 200 pounds and maybe not have the greatest body, but they can still hit. And if you make a mistake, they're going to make you pay for it. So it's interesting to see at different places some of the different sort of physicalities of the players.
Just to make an observation for people who have never really seen those levels, and sometimes on paper, Division I, II, and III seem worlds apart. And I know that for guys that are being recruited, high school baseball players that are getting recruited sometimes, and I certainly don't mean this, in a derogatory way toward the Division III level at all, but just to kind of bring things together, I think kids get recruited by, a lot of kids out there have a Division I or bust mentality. If they get recruited by Division II schools, they feel a little bit slighted. And if they get recruited by only Division III schools, it's really demoralizing for some kids until they get there. And realize the level of baseball. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just, an observation that I've had, I live near a pretty small Division I college, and my family sometimes will go watch some basketball games there.
Yeah.
I would almost make the comparison that a small Division I basketball team playing someone, playing a top 25 type of team, the disparity between the top 25 Division I and the small Division I, who, the conference, whoever wins the conference is probably going to be a 15 or 16 seed in the tournament.
Yep.
The disparity between those levels of Division I is probably pretty similar to, a mid to small Division I baseball team compared to a D3. There's almost the same type of disparity, from the top of Division I to the bottom as there is from, a middle tier Division I to a good Division III team. Do you think that's fairly accurate, just as far as giving people who have never seen the levels a better idea of how much of a difference there really is? Because there is, but there's not that great of a difference.
I mean, absolutely. I think that's a really good comparison where, even if you just look at college basketball this year, what was it last week when Stephen F. Austin went and beat Duke? Like, in baseball, like if you're going to play a mid-major D1 against a good D3 program, probably the majority of the time the Division I will win that game. But any given day, I think a good D3 program has the talent to match up and could win that baseball game on that given day. So I think that's a pretty fair analogy.
It's almost a similar analogy as well, as that the small Division I basketball team is going to have guys. They're probably going to have a pretty good shooter who's a little bit undersized, and they're probably going to have a pretty good pretty decently athletic guy underneath the basket, but he's probably going to be a couple inches shorter and a couple of 20, 30 pounds lighter than you might see at the really big school, but still guys that can play, guys can handle the ball, and on the right day, they can pull out a victory. So that's just a thought that I had that I think to give people a better visual, because I think more people out there have watched the NCAA basketball tournament than have probably gone out and watched various levels of college baseball. So
yeah, and I think the interesting part too from a recruiting side is, like, for us at the end of the day, like we are kind of interested in the kid that feels jilted by the Division I's and Division II's, because that's the type of player that we think can make an impact for us right away. So, that's what we really push, I think, from a recruiting standpoint to some of those guys is, all right, well, we understand, when you woke up as a junior in high school on the first day of school, that Division III wasn't like your main goal and your dream school, but this could be an opportunity for you to come into a program that wins, that does things the right way, and you're going to get a chance to play right away. And I think that's what can resonate with some of those guys that might have initially had that D1 or bust mentality.
And two things you just said there really resonate with me: the opportunity to play right away and the opportunity to win. Because my experience has been that if you lack one of those, it's not going to be a totally satisfying career. And if you lack both of those, guys are probably going to look back with some regret. Is that what you see as well? And do you see guys that play for you that win and have a good career? I mean, do they really look back into their career and say, boy, I could have been a Division I or Division II player? Or are they pretty satisfied with things just because they've had success on the field and individually?
I think by and large that they're pretty satisfied and know that it, like you said, it was a good experience. They got a chance to compete or win championships and play in NCAA tournaments, and not to take anything away from especially the Division I schools, in the Northeast, but that's not always the case. So I think, when they weigh their options, for certain kids being able to compete for championships and win, and those are the guys we want. We talked about recruiting earlier and bringing in the right guys. Like, that's a question we ask guys when they're on campus for their visit is, how important is winning? And a lot of times they give you a short answer, and we ask them to elaborate on that because we really want to hear how important that is to them, because that's going to be a driving force. That's one of the things that we can push here specifically that can help get guys to us.
So one or two more questions, and now I'll let you go. I don't want to take up your whole afternoon, even though I think it's been really good. I've really enjoyed the conversation so far.
Me too.
When a player comes to visit, is there anything that player can do or say, and you may have just alluded to one, is there anything a player can do or say that makes you less interested than before he came?
Sometimes it's actually what they don't say that can almost make you less interested. Like, we have campus visits, and if players don't come in prepared with questions, and it just comes off as almost disinterested sometimes, where you're like, hey man, we spent a lot of time trying to set this visit up with you and put a good itinerary together, and then we get to sit down and talk, and you don't have a lot of curiosities about what we got going on here. Like, really, how interested are you? I think that's the biggest thing that we see more than anything else is just, and sometimes it's just that they don't know. They haven't really been coached up on how to handle the visits, but I think if somebody's listening to this that is either a prospective student or maybe a parent of a prospective student or a high school coach, I think it's pretty simple to sit down for 10, 15 minutes and help the families with just come up with it's just going to be a brief list of questions too, because kind of like this conversation, I mean, the conversations are going to go wherever they need to go, but when student athletes come in sort of unprepared for that, that can be a turnoff. And, the other side of it is like, I just kind of watch how do they treat their mom or dad and just even their appearance on the visit and some of those little things that we talked about earlier that even on a recruiting visit are being evaluated, where I think sometimes players miss the boat.
What about appearance can either, make you, I guess, either, a plus or minus in that column? What should a kid who's coming on campus for a visit, what would you like to see? What don't you want to see?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be, we're not talking shirt and tie here or suit or anything like that, but, a nice pair of jeans or khakis, a decent shirt that doesn't look like you pulled it off your floor, the morning of the visit, threw it on in the car and rolled in and I would avoid sweatpants and mesh shorts and things like that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's almost like a mini job interview, and I know a high school kid's not really thinking about it that way, but I know I'm going to dress for a certain way for when we have guys on campus, and so the expectation is somewhat similar, with a degree of sort of variability from the recruit side, but like I said, a nice pair of jeans, a pair of khakis, a decent shirt. If it has a collar on it, that's a bonus, but I just think just to show that you put a little bit of thought into it, I think is the point.
What if a guy shows up with put some thought into it and he's wearing a pair of mesh shorts so you can check out his calves, or he's wearing a cutoff because he really wants to show he's been working out? I mean, that's put some thought into it, right?
That's true. That is true. If it's a cutoff, I'm probably telling Coach Lindsay that I just had a meeting with the AD and I got to roll. So.
Oh my gosh. All right, and then I had another question, and to be honest with you, after that, I don't know what I was even going to ask you. I think it's probably a good place to stop.
Sure.
Coach Torresani, I really appreciate this. This is Bryan Torresani again. If you kind of jumped into this in the middle of the podcast, this is Bryan Torresani. He's the head coach at Arcadia University, a Division III school in Southeast Pennsylvania. He's had a great track record of success, a true winner, and to me, someone who's really got it together. He's got a great idea of what he's doing. He's got a great plan, and obviously it's working. And I think you can, look for Coach Torresani to continue to have great success where he is, or even potentially move up move on somewhere to give him other opportunities. But I think wherever he is, he's going to continue to have a lot of success. To me, some people just get it, and to me, Bryan Torresani gets it. We're so glad to have you as a part of Figure It Out Baseball. So blessed to have the videos that you've given us, and your time today has really been a lot. So, Bryan Torresani, I appreciate you being here, spending your time on the podcast this morning, and, hopefully we can get some more from you in the future, whether it's a podcast or more videos. But, regardless, we just really appreciate everything that you've given to Figure It Out so far.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And like I said at the beginning, I admire what you're doing with the site, and you got some really good coaches on there, and the content's fantastic. I mean, I've even jumped on and watched videos myself and have taken ideas from people. And so I think the more good baseball people we can get out there putting content on the internet, I think is only good for the game.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the convention that people go to, right? I mean, it's no different than that. College guys can learn from other college guys, and that's what we've got on Figure It Out Baseball. It's figureitoutbaseball.com. It's all college coaches that are sharing information, and a lot of times, there's video that's certainly meant for a younger age group, but a lot of the content that's shared, and particularly your content, Bryan, is stuff that you're doing with your own players. I mean, you are really putting it out there as far as what you guys are doing at practice, right?
Absolutely. Yep. That's what we know, and that's what we think we do well. So we don't mind people knowing it. So.
Yeah, and that's such a healthy thing about baseball. One of my favorite things about the game is coaches that are willing to share, what they're doing and having success. And I'll tell you, just on the website, it's a whole lot easier to get college coaches to share information than it is pro guys. It's like the pro organizations want to keep everything bottled up, and the college guys just want to share what they know. And it's like it doesn't matter. I'm sure that there are some things that coaches would hold back that maybe they think is their secret sauce or whatever, but for the most part, guys are really willing to share it, and that's one of my favorite things about the college game.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate your time again, Bryan, and, good luck to you guys coming up, and we hope to have you back here again on Figure It Out in a not-too-distant future.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks so much.